successful girls or children. And then in terms of the opportunity to grow, to have working capital, to start their own business, women still need help. Yeah, so I said in education, in terms of starting business, women still needs help in Indonesia, I think. Yeah.
How do you see it on your return? You've been away for 10 years, I think you'd said, in other places in Asia, so you've obviously come back. Have you noticed a significant change? Do you feel like there's been progress in the time that you've been away?
No, definitely. And I think we discussed a little bit about this, but I felt that technology is also enabling women to start their own business, right? I mean, we see more and more women that are traditionally wouldn't think about joining sort of like the corporate world now has the opportunity to, like what you were doing, right? To start initiating something. And I think technology is enabling them to do that. The other thing that I think sometimes is also happening, because as we don't necessarily have a lot of constraint in terms of equality, right? As in terms of like regulation and all that, I sometimes feel that we tend to limit ourselves, right? Sometimes we feel like we're not assertive enough in demanding what is our right. I think that's also the thing. And it could be cultural, it could be, but you know, this also could be a phenomenon that's just more gender specific. But I think that's also another thing that could really help us in terms of just being able to be more equal and to seize more opportunities for us to really start demanding that, you know, to be much more assertive, to be taking control over that situation. I mean, what I mentioned earlier, I think in a way I started doing that because I used to not be like that at all, but I started doing that when the situation became a lot more difficult for me not to do it. You know, when I became a single mom, then I realized that I need to take charge and I need to take more control. And that's when I start not being apologetic about being a woman, but start feeling that because I'm a woman, then I can demand more, right? So that's also a personal shift that I think we need to start thinking about as well.
Yeah, and how do you look at this from the perspective of an entrepreneur? Because when we were talking at lunch, I know Muda and Zaza talked about how they've been lucky to work for companies that have always supported them as women and women in general, and they've worked in industries where women have had opportunities to succeed. As an entrepreneur, it can be lonely, right? It's a tough thing to do. Has it made any difference, do you think, that you're a woman? Has that increased the toughness and the barriers, or has it not made any difference?
I think as a country with the most population of Muslim in Indonesia is Muslim, so I think they still have their mindset that women shouldn't make a really serious career or something like that, because they think that in Islam that women shouldn't work really hard because they have their husband to do that, so they just taking care of the house, something like that. But right now, I agree with what Ibu Widow said, that technologies changed it all, changed the perspective. It's changed their mindset that they still can work from their house, from their home, with what they're good at, like maybe in fashion or in cookings or something like that. So from the internet, they gain more knowledge or something like that. But right now, they start to change mindset as well. Because, you know, maybe our parents or our generation before that, they gave us mindset that women shouldn't make a really serious career or shouldn't study very hard because you're gonna end up in the kitchen anyway. So I think right now the mindset is different. People, women get more knowledge from the internet. They get encouragement from the people, the women around as well. So they encourage and brave to start something new based on what they get from the internet as well. And right now, there's a lot of women who lead the company as well, and then the women who start making their own labels, like in fashion or their own business. I think it's also because the communities and the encouragement, the empowerment that they get from the women that they know as well, from their communities as well.
Great. So there's a lot of positive stories there. Now, obviously, you've worked in your role. You've worked in many countries around the world. How do you look at Indonesia, the differences and the similarities, and in terms of where it sits from a progress perspective?
Slightly different observation before I get to that. The one thing that shocked me so much in my very first meeting with my new team was how quietly all the women spoke. Even the most senior, well-educated,
You should hire Desi. Where's Desi?
kick-ass nutritionists and experts in their field, they all whispered. And it nearly killed me because I couldn't hear them. And we were on a conference call with our office in Jayapura and Kupang and Padang and Yogyakarta. And they certainly couldn't hear. And I couldn't hear a word they were saying either. So that was my first shock was, my God, the women here, I can't hear them. So we've changed that a little bit. But if you're sitting in the audience and you have this tendency, speak up, because the boys, they don't whisper. But the other thing that I've noticed is that when I can hear what the women have to say, it is extremely good at explaining to me the cultural sensitivities and considerations around what decisions we ought to be taking. And I get a much better sense of that from my female team members than I do from the boys. That being said, I work in an industry, most of our work is delivering food, be it off the back of a truck or out of a plane into Syria or using helicopters or mules. And it's a very logistics, transport, boy industry that we traditionally work in. And the women who are also in our logistics field have exactly that same sensitivity to how to get things done here. Sometimes even better than the men because they know how to navigate the intercultural politics.
Now, we started the panel talking about Kartini, which is someone I learned about just today. Obviously, she was large in the field of education, and she's become a real role model for Indonesians. I guess as you become successful in your careers, you also, whether you like it or not, become role models. So what's your advice for young women who are starting out on their careers? What kind of things would you recommend they do or don't do? What should they look out for? And what should their mindset be? So start with you, Zaza.
All right. I think, like Ida said, that we need to be more assertive, be more outspoken, and speak louder. That's true. And be recognized. And not be shy about it. I think it's more cultural that you experience that somehow we were taught that if you shout, you're not feminine, I guess. So again, that needs to be broken down. Yes, be more assertive, be outspoken, say what you really mean and, make sure people understand what you mean and be better negotiator. Yes, and I think one way that can give encouragement for that is to study harder than the boys.
Absolutely. You obviously work in a sector which is really attractive to everybody trying to get into the tech and the media sector. So what do you look for when you're working with young women?
I guess just to build on what Zaza is saying, my way of doing this is always asking myself, and this is a famous Facebook question actually, what would you do if you're not afraid? And then you do it. I think that's an excellent advice, right? And it's not just for women actually, but most of the time we're constrained by our fears, and most of our decisions in life are usually driven by our fears. Primitively, it's what has gotten us to survive this world, but the world has changed so much that we should no longer rely on that, and yet we should rely on, if you were to be able to do whatever you want, what would you do? And I think that's probably my advice on that point. Coming back to tech, I think, again, someone who's open to adventure, willing to learn, and also not afraid of speaking loud or being really assertive, because What I found really refreshing is like, you know, the people that I've met just recently after I come back with Facebook are very, very young, very energetic, super visionary as well. I was quite impressed with some of the Ignite talks, you know. I mean, again, these are students, there's some of them are fresh graduate, but they have a vision. And I think that's really, really exciting. And you know, and I'm very excited to be part of that as well. Thank you.
Diane, I know you're an inspiration to many women, not just in the fashion business, but women that want to become entrepreneurs, because you've made that a success. So I'm sure you engage with a lot of people who are thinking about that or trying to start out their own businesses. What's your advice to them?
I think one of the most important is knowledge. We need to learn as much as we can from our interests, like what are our interests, and then we can learn from there as much as we can, and then spread the knowledge as well to everyone, because it will be useful as well for us. And then beside knowledge, we also need to focus more on networking, something like this. It's really helpful because from networking, we can expand our connection with everyone, and then we can get something new as well from them. And then the last one is, I can say that we need to stay curious with everything, like from everywhere, like from maybe if you're in fashion, you can get curious from another things, because from being curious, we can learn and we can get something that we don't know before. Yeah.
Sure. Well, with your networking doesn't seem to be a problem, given how many Instagram followers you have. You shouldn't have any issues there. So I'm going to open it up to the audience. Has anyone got any questions for our esteemed panel? Anyone? No, I think you've dazzled them with your knowledge. Well, think about any questions you have. Put your hand up if you've got any. I wanted to go back to the theme of education, because that was really what Kartini was famous for. And really opening up education to women in Indonesia. And obviously that's the foundation of being able to live your dreams and create roles for yourselves, having a good education. So how would you compare education here versus other places you've seen from a women's perspective? If that's something you know about.
So, yeah, actually what's amazing to me is the difference between JIS, which is the big Jakarta International School, and some of the other places where we have programs in eastern Indonesia. And just that massive gulf in between what is truly out of this world level and the very, very basic, not quite dirt floor schools, but not much more than a couple of desks and a blackboard. What is there, though, is, and has impressed me a lot, are the teachers in some of those very small, very remote schools, which actually the life of the school is quite all-encompassing for many of the teachers. And that's really important, because whenever I go and I'll talk to the last year of the primary school and ask them how many kids are going to go on to high school, I start to see many, many more of the girls putting up their hands. And they are determined that they are going to be the first ones in their family that go forward. And that's bringing tremendous amount of hope. I hope that there'll be enough places for them in the secondary schools and then tertiary, but there's still a lot of room to improve there.
When you look at recruitment, say for Facebook, do you, I'm sure you engage with many of the universities around Indonesia to recruit from. Do you see any challenges from a gender perspective when you're recruiting, or do you find that girls are getting the right education opportunities and coming through and getting the opportunity to join companies like yours?
Again, very little experience, because I'm only a very short period of time in Facebook. Actually, just in general, it's not easy to recruit, especially in the tech space, purely because there are so few of them. and also because the other players are willing to pay a lot of money. So, I mean, even for Facebook, it is a difficulties to recruit. I guess in terms of fair opportunities, I guess what I can say is, again, sometimes they are the one who decide whether it's the right thing to do to pursue higher education or not. I was just having a conversation with my taxi driver, and he was asking me if he should let his 18-year-old daughter study in ITB. And I was like, of course you have to. Like, it's not even a question. And he was saying, yes, but she's going to be away. And so I sort of like tried to encourage him, and I said, if you have given her all the right, in Indonesia it's called bekal. I don't know what would you say it in English, but if you've given the right foundation, right, for her to do the right thing, and if you give her all the right examples, you should be courageous enough to let her go and pursue her dream. I mean, ITB is one of the best schools in the country. And he was pondering whether, and I know for a fact that if it were a boy, he wouldn't have had a second thought, you know, so yeah.
So that kind of goes back to the point you raised right at the beginning around you felt that there was a lot of progress professionally for women and opportunities professionally for women, but that home life and family life often is still, they're still sort of positioned in the traditional kind of homemaker role rather than someone who's going to go out and be successful. So what do you think needs, it seems like there's been tons of progress professionally, obviously there's still plenty to be done, but what can be done on the home side to address the challenges that women face at home?
I think media and technology will help, you know, also putting forward the success story of women who break through, so the parents can, you know, be enlightened, be inspired by other successful women. I think media can play a big role, and technology also can share more of these inspiring stories. Yeah, Indonesia love inspiring stories, so that's